Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NHRD Kolkata Chapter's flagship HR Speak. As we are all entering the conversation of today, thank you so much for making it this afternoon. With us, we have a very, very dynamic leader in HR. She is holding the role of business partnering in dynamic business environment and building an inclusive workforce with Novartis. Her name is Saswati Samantara. She's the director HR and DEI partner. Of course, you all know me, but still, my name is Sweata Gupta. I'm a part of the NHRD Kolkata chapter. I serve them from contribution to the HR Speak. Right now, my assignment is as the OD head and the inclusion head for an organization in the insurance sector, Ageas Federal Life. And aside that, I definitely look forward to learn. The journey that I have taken has also brought me from altogether training to employee engagement to OD, and now I've got a new responsibility in the present organization, which is inclusion. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion from the angle of my role, and I'm very sure that all of you are too, from your role, as well as to learn what's going cross sectorally in different sectors and what is working best. We'll bring to you how the role has emerged over time. We'll bring to you what is diversity in today's parlance and how it is no more a luxury to have a diversity inclusion in the organization, and it has become more like a necessity. So we have a lot of discussion to do, and that's what has been agreed between me and Saswati. So I'm not going to park this discussion for long. I will directly get into introducing Saswati. Saswati is an accomplished HR leader with over 16 years of extensive experience across diverse sector. Currently serving as the Director Country HRBP at Novartis India, she oversees HR functions across multiple operations in India. Saswati also leads the DEI Charter for India and deeply committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion to foster an inclusive workplace. Before joining Novartis, Saswati made significant contributions during her tenure with the Vedanta Group. Saswati has held both country and global leadership positions and has successfully led large-scale transformational projects spanning geographies and business units. Her favorite quote, "If your dreams do not scare you, they are not big enough," by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Personal interest is where she's based out of Hyderabad during her spare time. Saswati enjoys playing and watching sports, loves cherishing quality moment with her daughter. And I'm sure this is what is written, and there is more that she wants to tell us. I would immediately request Saswati to start with a small introduction, which could be more than what I have said, and would interest us to know her more during our 1 hour of discussion that we are going to have today. And then, of course, we'll get into the topic of today's discussion.
Thank you, Sweata. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. Great to be here today. Really looking forward to today's discussion. I'm sure I'll learn as much I can share in my limited capacity. Maybe a little bit more, if I have to share, maybe I can expand on the quote. If your dreams are not big enough, if your dreams do not scare you, they're not big enough. I think that resonated with me quite deeply. While, it's been decades that I have been collecting a lot of quotes, and I'm sure it'll resonate with all of us that in the mood that we are, if we see a certain quote, it just resonates at that point in time. But this somehow has stayed with me for forever, and just reminds me that when I'm getting into a new role or in a difficult situation, if I'm not really comfortable, out of my comfort zone, which means I'm on the right track if I go by this particular quote. And so I just try to stay the course and go along with the flow. So that's what I have a little to share, and really excited to move forward with the discussion.
Wonderful. So the topic today is role of business partnering in dynamic evolution, and I'm sure along with that, of course, and building inclusive workforce. So I'll stick to the first part of today's topic: role of dynamic partnering in uh, the business environment and how ecosystems have changed. What do you want to tell us about how your role as a business partner has evolved over a period of time, considering the quote you just mentioned, which means you've just dreamt beyond what was the comfort and then you saw yourself achieving that. So, how has that ecosystem enabled you to expand your role?
Yeah. Now, before I get started, just a quick shout out to you, Shweta, and the entire NHRD organizing team. I think you are doing an incredible job by spotlighting topics which needs these kind of discussions and critical thinking, because it's us here and also outside of this room who are responsible to take the baton forward. So kudos to all of you for what you're doing. Um,
Thank you.
you're most welcome. I'll just start off like and just in no means that I have achieved it all. I'm a lifelong student, and the learning process is on. I'm a work in progress in all means. Perhaps I'll just step back and start with how the HR business partnering field has evolved over a period of time, and let me start with what does HR business partner mean, because I think it means a lot of different interpretations to a lot of us, depending on the organization and the industry we are in. So, as the name suggests, HR business partner is really partnering with the business and the leadership to build a future forward organization. And you could have the best of the business strategies, you could have the best of the HR strategies, but if there is no linkage and the connectedness between both, you might not be able to achieve the impact that you have set out for. And that's where perhaps the role of HR business partnering comes in as a strategic liaison between the business, so that the business deliverables at the end of the day are only delivered by the people. So it cannot, exist in standalone silos, but has to be beautifully coexisting and well integrated. And that's where perhaps the role of business partner comes in. Now, as I mentioned about the organization and industries that we would be in, a little bit around the hat that HR business partner really dons, right? So you could be a HR business partner in an organization managing one business, or you could be a HR business partner managing multiple business in the same organization, or even while you're contemplating of switching jobs, the business could be at different stages of its evolution. If you are, say, in a business which is just getting started or ramping up, or say is more stable and is in a maintenance phase, or say if it's like going through a lot of transformation, whether people moving within the organization or outside of the organization, the role of the business partner really becomes critical in wearing the hat which is more pertinent to the context, I would say. You could be a counselor, you could be a coach, you could be a trusted advisor, you could be a facilitator, and all depending on the context is where you customize and tailor fit your solution, right? Which, because it's as much it is important about the content that you have, more what is important is how you are applying the content to the context in which you are operating, so that it is fit for purpose. And that's where the agility part of the HR business partner also comes in. Now, really coming into the evolution as we gotten started during the initial part of the conversation, right? I have been in organization, and I'm sure organization even today also exist, where everything, right from hire to retire and everything in between, is handled by HR business partner. And you will also find organizations which are more progressive, more large scale organizations, wherein you would see HR business partner really playing a more strategic kind of a role. What I mean by that is it's obviously very important to have the employee value chain activities going, because those are the moments that matter and touches the employee at different stages of their life cycle. But what necessarily comes into the gamut of HR business partnering is more futuristic and forward-looking. Like how are you preparing the organization for the future? What are the strategic focus areas, say, for the organization in the next 2 to 3 years? Really looking back to see, do we have those capabilities to be, really staying ahead of the curve and really winning in the market? What are those roles or skill sets that's going to give us the most disproportionate value? Do we have all of that today? If not, what is our strategic action plan to get there? So really about the organization design, the organization development, around the strategic workforce planning, really driving the organization through change, because as we all know, there is some or the other change that's happening in and around every minute. So how is it that you are leading the organization also with care and empathy is also something that the role of HR business partner is very much deeply embedded with. Maybe I'll just take a pause and see if that resonates.
Of course, we're just warming up in the context of today's discussion. And of course, you're saying that how there are different labels which we as business partner have to uh, play out at different times. And it is just not limited to business partnering. It has gone beyond. I mean, hearing words like being a facilitator, being a transformational lead, being a coach are new words that have been added to business partnering, from managing payroll and admin and all of that, which was more of uh, the business as usual, to how do we value add to the organization in the context of transformation they are in. So that's very well said, and I'm sure each one of us here are now contextualizing it to a role that we are envisioning to join, or in the context of our organization. Help us understand, does this role, which you have said has emerged over a period of time, is the same for different sectors, or there is a flavor that has emerged in, you are from the Vedanta group and now you're in Novartis. So has this role been different here, or has it been different for different sectors according to you? And if so, how?
Yeah. So you rightly said it, Shweta. So the HR operating model in itself has undergone a metamorphosis, right? And it is evolving as we speak. So it's undergone a significant transformation over a period of time. And every model, I would say, was important and was relevant to its own time. But as we are evolving, because if we look at the world around us, right, we just woke up from the pandemic. I don't know if we are still in the weeds or completely out of it. But the way the things have evolved, the way associates or employees, I don't know, the nomenclature might differ in different organization, but the people who work for the organization, right? Like their expectations and also organization expectations have evolved over a period of time. They are questioning it at the DNA level, like what was something very important to them, maybe like suddenly has turned negligible, because the world has also shown its reality, and we have also woken to a new reality which we perhaps were not even ready for. So it is very important to catch up with the pace of how the employees' expectations and priorities are evolving, how is the organization expectation and priorities are evolving, because at the end of the day, we are an enabling function and we have to enable our business to win in the marketplace. So coming back to the HR business partnering role, which I alluded to, I think it's very important to add value or create value both to the employees and also to the organization, so that we are staying ahead of the curve. Now, if the organization now is in a place wherein, as per their structure and as per their philosophy, as per their purpose, if they're fit for purpose and that structure is working for them, so be it. But there are large magnitude organization, where they talk about scale, scope, velocity at which they move. They have to remain agile. They, at the end of the day, they have to be in hand and glove with the business, so that they're able to deliver value. So in large scale organizations, typically what has happened is, HR business partnering role is more of a transformative role, which works very closely with the CEOs, with the leadership team, in really defining the organization of the future. While it is equally important in the same breath to make sure that we do not drop the ball, which we are typically known for, right, in terms of a hiring or training or payroll or compensation, equally important. We cannot be also neglecting that. But if some role is stretched too thin, might not be able to do justice for what that role is set up for. And that's the reason why we see different models, organizations adopting which best works for them.
That is pretty thoughtful, and I'm sure at this point we are all contextualizing and thinking in terms of how the role has now emerged for you, or how are you looking at leaders in HR working out different ways of transforming the change that is being aspired by the organization for you. So the lens that you have to look at it is much deeper and wider as compared to what we could have seen with the stereotypes that we were imagining the HR business partner ring role was into. So you mentioned agility being one of the most important skills in the last two questions that you answered, and you mentioned that it's very important to understand how the transformation is happening. So obviously transformation, change, agility, these become the key word for today. What are the skills that really will help anyone who is emerging as a leader in business partnering, or even a new professional in business partnering?
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are a host of skills, as I alluded to, that you have to wear different hats depending on the context you are, so that your content becomes relevant. But if I have to just pick, say, the top 3 or 5, the first thing has to be really going back to the drawing board. It says HR business partner, which means business acumen becomes paramount. The deeper the knowledge about the business, the more contextualized your people strategy is going to be. Today you are in a retail business, tomorrow in a pharma business, day after in something else. But it's very important to really understand the evolution curve of the business. Who are the stakeholders? How is it that the business is making money? Who are the customers? Who are the investors? What's the feedback looking like? So that the more you are ingrained into the business is where you can really be a trusted advisor, as I said, because it's also very important to win that credibility with the business, for you to be that trusted advisor and work hand in hand with the business. So business acumen really comes at the top, followed by strategic thinking. Now, as we said, it is a transformative role. It is a strategic role, a role which can anticipate the future. For example, today we have gone through one pandemic. God forbid we should not be getting into any such anymore in future. But we should always be ready if any such unprecedented scenario really occurs. How is it that our business is ready in terms of supply chain, in terms of our people capability? Because there's always a war for talent. How is it that you are amping up your sourcing and scouting strategies? How is it that you know which are the roles which is creating the most disproportionate value? Do you have the robust bench strength so that there is no impact on the business continuity, etc.? So business acumen, strategic thinking, and the third one is again coming back to how you're driving change. Whether it is within the organization in terms of your engagement, your attrition or retention, Or if we look externally, whether it's our economic scenario, the geopolitical crisis, the political scenario, etc., there would be something or the other in terms of change that will be hitting us every moment. How is it that we are leading the organization through change with care and empathy? That's where, the culture also becomes very important. And so it's not just based on gut and intuition that we will be, at an arm's length, really advising the business, but really being in that situation, having that experience, feeling it together so that we can rally the troops around us towards it. The other thing would be, of course, action orientation is also important because it has to be a good blend of thought leadership and people leadership. So getting outcomes, getting things done becomes equally important. But I think one thing I would really underscore here, which I have learned in the last 16 years, is how is it that you're managing paradox? More and more, as you go higher up in the organization, there is less and less of black and white. Mostly things operate in the gray, and there would be tension. So how is it that as a skilled HRBP, are you leaning towards managing that tension? And that is where really managing paradoxes, really working closely with your stakeholders, having those interpersonal skills. Most of the time, you might not be operating from a position of authority with a title which gives you that sense of command, but how is it that you're influencing without authority? If you are competent, if you know your job well, then automatically, whether you have a defined authority or not, you would be able to influence and inspire people. So I would say that the fifth and the most important, perhaps, would be managing paradox as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Saswati. It's quite intriguing that you also mentioned the art with which we manage the culture and, in fact, put the foundation of the organization culture and then build upon that. And that's what drives people, and of course, the positive correlation to business and numbers and revenue and all of that. So, if we had to talk about the role of business partnering in culture building, what do you think would be some of those cues or best practices, whatever you want to talk about, which you want to share with the audience today, which helps the organization find its true north?
Absolutely. I think it's we have been talking for like now 30 years about diversity per se, because it was important for us to get the right level of representation into any meetings that we are in. But in the same breath, what we are hearing now more of is around equity, around inclusion, around belonging, because if we do not have an inclusive environment, we would not be able to harness all the diversity that we get into the organization. And more often than not, we usually find ourselves in a catch-22 situation wherein we bring in a lot of diverse workforce by doing everything under the sun, but we are again not able to retain, develop, and engage them. And then we either lose out to the competition or they do not feel as much belong to the organization and that they leave. So inclusive leadership, I would say, has become more and more of a critical capability of our leaders, of the ability to be really leading and nurturing a safe and a learning ecosystem where every voice is heard, valued, and respected, so that everyone, the way, no matter how they are, who they are, they should be their best selves when they're at work. We have seen, like at home, we are somebody, when we enter into the workforce, we mask up, our guard is on, and then we are a completely different human being. But is it really allowing us to be our best self? The way we most operate effectively might not be the case. So how is it that we create that open environment where people can be celebrated who they are, for what they bring onto the table, and really have that sort of ecosystem which values diversity, and also our leaders building an equitable and inclusive workforce. You mentioned about some of the best practices which perhaps can help us in building an inclusive workforce. There are many, and I'm sure organizations around the world are also implementing many of them. And some of them which is there on top of my mind now is something which I can share, but obviously no means it's like the only sort of best practices. The list can just go on, but some of the important ones that perhaps we could take away. um, the first one, really, if I have to structure it in terms of the employee life cycle, right? So even before the hiring process, even before like somebody looks to applying for a particular organization, the first thing that they perhaps see is your job description. So how is it that you can have inclusive language mentioned in your job description, which is gender neutral, and which really avoids all sort of biases? I can just give a hypothetical example here. For example, somebody walks into your office and has a beautiful haircut, and you have all the right intentions. You walk up and you offer a compliment and say, "Oh, she has done a great haircut." And then after a second, you realize, "Oh, I already assumed that the hairdresser was a she." So the intention here is not really anything hurtful or otherwise. It's really about the unconscious biases that we have within us, and how is it that we are more aware of it. Each one of us has that unconscious bias, but it's more important to be aware of those blind spots, and how is it that we are more responsible, more thoughtful and mindful when we are operating in a collective environment. So first is around the inclusive language. So you are sending a right message out in the world that your organization is DEI, what do you say, pro organization, which looks, which makes sure that even the JD, wherein which they are, floating out in the market to attract talent, is also thoughtful and taken care of. So that's one part. Then we come to the hiring space. Say in the hiring space, we have to make sure that the panel who are hiring is neutral. You have both men and women. The candidate slates that the hiring managers are looking at is also neutral. It has both men and women. So that on the basis of meritocracy, that the hiring managers can really be able to take a call. And coming down to the hiring manager who make the decision at the end of the day, how is it that we are equipping them with the right knowledge and understanding, and of the biases that perhaps creeps in unintentionally? How is it that they are more aware of, and it doesn't affect the candidate experience before, during, and after the interview? So hiring part. Now the person enters into the workforce, right? What is it that we are doing about the awareness level in terms of DEI awareness and sensitization? For all our new joinees, it is very critical that they see it in our value, in our mission, in our strategy, not something which is a standalone, a siloed thing which is happening by its own, but really organizations' commitment towards DEI and really embedded into everything that they're doing. It's very important right from the get-go to have the new joiners entering into the workforce, realizing the power that they have in their hands to be really creating that inclusive environment. It obviously, leadership has a great role to play, but each one of us in the organization also have a role to play in terms of mitigating our own biases and promoting an inclusive workforce. So that's again very important. Now, for our existing associates who perhaps are aware of the commitment and the vision and the strategy and the priorities, etc., for them also it is equally important at a different level. What I mean by that is, you are getting host of new joiners into the organization. There are millennials, there are women, there are from people from minority groups, etc. How is it that as a leader you know how to engage in with them? You might be there in different DEI scenarios wherein you really do not know how to go about a particular situation, and it's not really about, you are trying to help but you are not aware as to how do you go about a particular situation. So really equipping managers with those kind of different nuances, subtleties, scenarios, what are the do's and the don'ts, what's acceptable, so on and so forth. So this cannot be a check in the box and a compliance. This has to be a deliberate, intentional effort. Inclusion cannot happen by accident. It has to be a very deliberate effort that each one of us have to take up in the workforce to be creating that environment that we would like to live in. Then we come to say around the development, awareness, retention part of it, right? We have heard about this one size does not fit all approach, and it beautifully sits in here, right? And we have heard about those equity and equality misconstruction all the time. Not everybody starts at the same level. Even if I say that, we are equal opportunity employers and we give opportunities equally to everybody, might not help people because everyone is different. Everyone needs are different. So first, what would be more important is how is it that we bring everybody to the same level playing field, and then ensure that there are equal promotion opportunities, equal development opportunities, there is pay equity, which means equal work, equal pay for equal work. All of that will then hold good after we, set the level playing field. There are many more, Shweta. I don't know where I should take a pause. You tell me. But I would just like to say one and very important, in fact, two more: leadership role modeling, right? The tone sets from the top. And it's very important for our leaders to make sure that, there is accountability in the team. There is visible commitment towards DEI in the organization. The moment the leader comes out with his own vulnerability, in terms of not that everything he's aware of, but really open to feedback, the lines of communication, and leading with humility and empathy is what really creates the psychologically safe atmosphere that we all aspire of. And last but not the least are the ERGs, the employee resource groups. It's very important to really support our ERGs. They are the groups which create that interconnectedness in the organization. They are the groups which really create that support system, the community feeling, and people really can then lean in wherein they require support. So a lot many are there. Perhaps I will take a pause and see where you are at, and then I can accordingly move
Very,
on.
very interesting. And I'm sure, along with me, the listeners this evening are also relating it back to where they are in terms not only as HR representatives, but also as employees, wherever they are in their employee life cycle in their organization, and the importance of inclusion in bringing in the positive roadmap to culture in any organization is a business imperative today, and not just a fancy word to have. We've done away with that era actually. So at this point, while I'm going to ask uh, Saswati in her experience to tell us more about diversity, because I'm sure this is the first HR speak which is talking of diversity at depth. Because so far, even in our HR speak, diversity was a good to have topic, which kind of piggybacked on something that we were talking about. But today we are talking exclusively on diversity as a topic, so, of course, we'll spend some more time in the interaction. Meanwhile, I will request our team member to please open up the chat box, where I would request the listeners today to put in their questions relating to the role of business partner in the dynamic ecosystem that we are working in, and the business imperative called diversity. Anything more that they would want to know? While we, between me and Swasti, we are taking up the last question, which has been decided for today. So, Saswati, you did mention about the different stage in the employee life cycle, and how it is the onus of each employee and the leadership to bring in the interweave in the way the culture is getting attuned to the inclusion of strategy of the organization. Would you like to share with us some of those um, say, you could say best practices, or you could say some of those factors that determine the priority of inclusion in any organization?
Yeah, I think there's course of research which now says that, and you also mentioned it very nicely, Shweta, that diversity is a business imperative and not just good to have, but really, really must to have. So, and this course of research really tells that the more diverse the thinking, you really see it in the bottom line in terms of more productivity, more revenue, more engagement, more retention, more psychologically safe environment, and so on and so forth. So it's very important for us to really then be very intentional about what is it that we are prioritizing in terms of like the way we talk about, we have business review meetings, we talk about our scorecards, we talk about the cost, we talk about P&L, so on and so forth. Do we also in the same breath talk about the importance of diversity? Okay, so it's very important. Like, if you prioritize what you feel is important to you as an organization, is when people will really see the intent in action. So there is always a lot of talk, which is important because that is where your creative juices really flow. And then there's all of these great ideas and suggestions that come in. But how is it that you stay the course? Because it wouldn't be easy. It's these are like historic gaps and inequalities that have been existed in our system, in fact in our fabric and DNA. So it will take its own time also to make sure that we are moving and we are moving in the right direction. So I would say first is make it a priority and make sure that you are measuring what you have set out for. If there are ways to measure your diversity, of course, because these are tangible numbers, there's also ways to measure inclusion. And if you are measuring it, if you have the intent, if you are closely reviewing it with your P&L as much as you are with the other operational aspects of the business, is when you know that you are on the right track. And if there is a delta, you really know from all the feedback that's coming in what's working for you and what's not. So it's very important to really have that feedback going all the time and really be thankful about all the feedback that's coming in. It's very easy to be surrounded with all yes people, but not really in the interest of the company. So make it a priority, make sure that what you have set out for, keep, stay the course and persevere it, and make, there would be small changes, but as long as there are incremental changes in the right direction, we are on the right path.
Great. And also, a recent McKinsey report has also kind of qualified what you just said, that diversity is no more a standalone imperative in business. Wherever it is being observed that inclusion has been prioritized by leadership, by employees as a priority item for them, in such organizations, it is also seen that one moment. In such organizations, it is also seen that the productivity has moved up by 26%. So basically, what has emerged is that culture, diversity, bringing in an inclusive workforce, thinking in the line of a positive cultural shift has attuned positive incremental business priorities. And with that, I'm moving into the next part, which is taking questions from the audience. And we have our first question from Swaroop. And the question that he has asked us is, what in your consideration should be the HR role to shed off the notion that HRBP roles are more operational and mostly limited to employee lifecycle management than strategic?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question, Shwaroop, and thanks for asking. I would say, there is this notion and perception, and as I was alluding to in my pitch a little while ago, that what leaders take notice of and what we HRs are usually known for is the employee value chain activities, right? So it's important for us also to level up our game. And I think we have done it, and not done it way ago, just in the recent past when the pandemic really hit us. That was a human crisis. I think it really catapulted HR into the front and center of everything. And it was like more than a business priority. And that is where the role of CHROs have got all the limelight and the spotlight as to how is it that they came together to really keep the business afloat and the engagement going and still having the talent on board. With all of these organization strategies of giving fully remote work to calling back to people full time to office and everything in between, these are not certain things that we had experimented in the past, but this is where the CHRO really stepped up to the level of CEO. So I would say to your question, it's more like really up leveling our game, really being a thought partner more than somebody who is always an executor. Really, is sitting with the leadership, really having all the data points on the table and bringing in the perspective which perhaps might not be as much known to the leadership, right? We as HR speak to different stakeholders, to our employees, to our leaders, to our customers, to us investors. We have so much of enriched feedback and insights. It's important for us to bring it back to those leadership discussions. And there is where then the leadership feels like what is the next decision that business should take in the right direction, which fetches for them and for the larger business as a whole. So yes, I wouldn't dismiss any role to be not important. Every role is important because it's a team sport, it's a team game. But especially for the HR business partner, it has been carved out for a certain purpose. And that purpose is really transformative in nature. Work closely with the leadership, create value for the employees, create value for the organization, and make sure that with your valuable add-ons, that the organization is set up to win in the market.
Thank you so much for that. Moving on to our next question from Rajiv. He's asking, how can HR VPs manage potential conflicts of interest when balancing employee advocacy with business strategy?
Yeah, I think this is one of the skill sets that I mentioned around managing paradox. And more often than not, as the nature of the role goes, we would be catching ourselves in situation wherein there is tension and there is different point of views, and wherein we are the ones who are usually the mediators, right? Now, this is like a really tightrope, and there is no shortcut or a silver bullet here. It's really dependent on the situation, on the context. What is important on our part to really ensure is we hear both sides of the story. We make sure that we are not rushing into any judgment or any decision. We stick to the North Star and we do the right things. It might not be in favor of somebody or the other, but it's what is right, and we are enabling the right thing forward. And we really make sure that we go by evidences, we go by data, we make sure that we give it time. What it looks, at the surface might not be the entire story. So we should give it that time, care, and empathy to make sure that we delve into details. And whatever the decision is, it's always very important to not forget the respect piece of it. Today X is there in a scenario, tomorrow somebody else would be, but how is it that you are making that experience for the person digestible, right? So it's very important. That's why to really lead everything from heart, with care, with respect, and with empathy. And whatever the decision is, it's not like you personally doing it, it's the right thing to do there. So, and most of the time, I have also seen people really beating themselves up, but it's not you really, it's the situation there, and you are just enabling it move forward.
That's a very important point. And with that, we have another question from Prashanjit Neogi. For a startup company, what will be the priority job of a HR, as always they take it on the run for business?
Yeah. So for a startup, and this is not like I have worked for a startup, but from my experience, I could say, because I have managed teams which were as good as startups, with just getting started in terms of new roles, the new businesses coming in, and then we are just helping the business, create its visibility and branding and thrive, so on and so forth. So for a startup, as we would all know, it's very important. There are certain things which is very important, which is cost, which is speed, which is acceleration, and which is getting more of market share, so on and so forth. So there it would be a very different ball game to businesses which are more like stable, established, have been there for a long period in time. And there it might not be very quick for us to really be embedding this culture related or engagement related or retention related pieces, because your focus there is very different. Your focus is how you get into the market, you make a mark, you build your credibility and your brand. So your focus there would be very different than from rest of the scenarios. But then an organization also has its evolution and the pathway, right? So as you start building in your workforce, it's very important also to embed them into the values of the organization, right? And that's where that is your North Star. You know the purpose of your organization, you know the North Star, and so the employees needs to be grounded in the values. Then the compass is right, then you would never go wrong. Cost will definitely be an important factor at that point in time. The rest of the things will gradually come in, and that is where we have to pace out our people strategy, so that it complements at what stage of the business it is in, and so that we can gradually move it forward in the best approach possible.
Sure, sure. Thank you for that. And uh, they kind of completely uh, summarized whatever we discussed from the beginning, because there was someone who's talked about a new venture, there's somebody who's talked about the business partnering role, and then there's somebody who's talked about how it can be more than the regular BAU imperatives that we drive as business partners. So moving on to the last question, is how I might want to coin it as, is there is a question from Shorunil Banerjee: when stakeholders ask for employee details, who put concerns or issue, how to manage that, as we have to maintain confidentiality?
Absolutely. And this is something that we face day in and day out. Believe me, who is the person? Sorry.
Shorunil.
Thank you for the question. I think this is a very pertinent and important question. This is how I have approached it. There could be better ways to doing that, and I would be very interested to hearing from you, all of you on the call as well. How do you do it? I always go back with the question of why. And that why is not really anything antagonizing, but it's really to understand, like, is it really important to know the name and the employee ID and the designation and everything else? What is the reason that you're asking the data for? As long as your need is met, it is not really important about the who behind it. So, and it's very important, what you pointed out around the data privacy. There are certain guardrails and constraints in the organization which we have to abide by. At the same time, we have to make sure that the business also gets the answer they are looking forward from us, while not really diluting or dissolving the confidentiality which is very important to be maintained. So, for example, I'll just give you a real life scenario. We have all gotten into this hybrid way of working, right? And there are organizations who have earmarked certain days that you have to come in, while there are organizations who have just said maybe 2 or 3 days or 4 days in a week that you have to come in. So this is particularly applicable for organization, those who have gone forward with flexible ways of working. Now, it is a challenge. One is we are all adults and we work in a trusted environment. If there is a rule in the organization, which is a policy or a guideline, it is expected by default from us that we would adhere to it. But not everybody really comes along, and people take their own time and pace to get along with it. So we see absenteeism. We see, one team not turning up, which has an adverse impact on the other team. Then there is comparing and contrasting, etc. Then managers obviously will come back to us and say that, can you give me the list of the names who are not turning up? While as an organization, if we want, we can, but we will never do that because that is not the right thing here. As managers, you need to be very much accountable for your own associate as the organization or HR BPs are. You can sit them down. It can just start with a simple conversation in terms of what's working for them, what's not working for them, how is it that the manager can help them, if there is any impediments or roadblock, how is it that you can help them through their own course. But managers should be knowing who is turning up and who is not. At max, there will be 10 to 12 employees that will be reporting to you. So it is so important that you have that close connection and check in with them to really be aware of where they are, what they are doing, what's working for them and what's not. So it's not really about then hiding behind the data and figuring out who that person is so that you go ahead and then have this conversation. It's not needed. So it just starts with that simple why.
Great, great. We start our conversations with why, and they say by the end of the fifth why, you know the reason as to why the situation has occurred. And with that, of course, we sum up the Q&A, and I would request Saswati to tell us more of anything that she wants to tell us more. And it could be simply about what is it that she enjoys doing when she is not at work. And with that, we will end today's discussion.
Absolutely. No, I think I would really like to wrap it up with a positive note, and especially around the diversity piece. While we have been talking for decades and decades now about diversity, but I think we all are standing on the shoulder of giants here. Giants meaning men and women who have gotten us to the point that we are in today. I feel myself incredibly fortunate to be sharing this platform with you, Shweta, with all of our listeners today on the call. I don't think this was I would say, a privilege for my mother or my grandmother. We are all here bringing in topics which really is relevant and important to us, and we are having this discussion because we care about it. And but still, there are areas or countries, etc., who are devoid of their basic rights in terms of education, etc. So we are incredibly lucky from that viewpoint, and we have made great strides. So I'll just take a moment to really acknowledge all the good work that has been done. And it's our now responsibility to take it forward. Yes, if we look at the stats, I don't think it really is at the level at which we would want it to be. We still see skewed representation. We even just, for example, if we take India's population, say 50-50 or say 52-48, from that 48 population, women in workforce get slashed to say 28 or 24. And then if we talk about women in leadership, it gets further down to 8%. I don't think we are equally represented when we go back to the stats. So there's clearly a lot more to do, and we should always do more. And we are moving in the right direction. I think 30 years back where we started, and if we see where we are today, there definitely has been a lot of movement in the DEI space. And organizations gradually are also acknowledging the fact that how is it that diversity is helping them really take better decisions? How is it that it is really helping them be a better employer, and also really driving the bottom line? So I would just encourage everybody to keep doing the great work that we all are doing. It might not fetch us immediate results, but I'm sure, like, for our generations to come, we are creating a better tomorrow and a better future. As regards myself, I think beyond work, as I mentioned earlier, which Shweta read out, in my bio is I'm a sports enthusiast. From last, it might sound a little over the top, but that's what is the truth, and I would share it with all of you today. When I was at the age of 6 or 8, I entered into martial arts, and it was into karate. For 14 long years, I pursued karate, and I went from district to state to national to international. And in fact, I won the world championship as well. And I think it was way back in 2004. But after that, because it was not a recognized sport, it wasn't into Commonwealth or Asian Games or into Olympics. So I did not have any way forward there. So it was very important for me then to really come back and focus on academics, because I have to stand on my own feet, with or without karate. But I think that's a big part of my life. It has always helped me manage my energy. Even after like a long day, it's always good to go back and do some kind of sports, etc. Just is kind of my well-being measure that I do, along with some other things as well. So yeah, and yes, I have a daughter, and she makes sure that if I have some extra time, that she needs my focus and attention. So I make sure that I give as much as I can from my routine.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend. We look forward to the monsoons with everything that happened across the election and our vote to write, which has settled down. It's important that we enter our monsoon season. Look forward to the next HR Speak episode 3 of series 6 soon. It will come up as soon as this month, and I'm sure we're going to enjoy the HR Speak with some warm, hot cup of tea and the monsoons. Have a great evening, and thank you, Swasti, once again for giving us such incredible information, knowledge, and best practices from your end. We wish you all the best in your future, and where dream is definitely not the limit, and it's beyond the sky.
Thank you so much, Shweta. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed the session. I hope all of you did as well. I wish you the great rest half of the day for all of you. Have a good day and a good career ahead. Bye.
Bye.